Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus and today we're going to be reading through and speculating about the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 402, Lightspeed Circuits, by Coverix and R. Seeding. Hello, if we have any circuit lovers reading, this is another dose of facts for you. Not sure I'm quite a circuit lover, but certainly a bit of a fan of what they can achieve. Short one this week, which is quite nice after some of the long ones we've had just in the recent few weeks, so we'll canter through this. Nice simple one this week, and don't worry, it might sound like it's going to be technical, but it's actually quite simple. Radar Transmission Network, by Coverix. It might be useful sometimes to send circuit signals over long distances. I personally never used it for anything, but when we were playtesting a while ago, Boskid insisted that we include circuit wires into our rail blueprints because you never know when it might be useful. I too never do this. I've seen a lot of players do it, and I kind of understand the reasons for it, and the ability to get information from outposts can be useful, particularly if you're sort of mega basing and stuff, but I personally have never really seen the point, because what I tend to do is to control things at more at a local level, so I'll have this outpost be smart in a sense, rather than bring any information back to the main base sort of thing. But I've seen a lot of players do it, and I do see the advantages of it, but I say it's never really been my cup of tea. Also, just to note, this is just them showing the, when you've wired up the wires to the power poles, it's what it looks like, but also right-hand drive, which I can't do right-hand drive. I've tried many times, but I mean, also I prefer the advantage of having the signals on the inside. I always just like that a bit better, but I just can't get my head around it. In Britain, we drive on the left, quite famously, and so I just can't get my head around right-hand drive. This is how our rail system looked, just in case. Now, this kind of cuts straight to the chase. This is quite a big feature that's coming in. And it just says, to avoid this dilemma, we added a long requested feature of wireless circuit transmission using radars, which, as I say, has been something people have been asking for ages. And it's kind of amazing that it's just coming in. There are a lot of ways to do it, but we wanted to keep it simple. So we decided that there is just a single radar channel for each surface. This means you don't have to configure anything. You just connect the wire and you are ready to go. If the radar loses power, the circuit connection is severed. So, if you've played SpaceX, and I'm literally just getting to this stage in my playthrough that I'm doing and on Twitch, plug. And basically, I'm now starting to try and communicate between the Nauvis land, as it were, the planet, and the Nauvis orbit. And there's a special couple of buildings that allow you to do that, and it basically allows you to send circuit network signals between different surfaces. Now, that's built in such a way that all of the surfaces can communicate with each other. I suppose, it could do long distance communication on a surface. I hadn't really thought about that because it's just a channel that's created, and you could have multiple things picking up the signal from that channel. So I'd never really, it just literally just occurred to me as I was reading this through that you could actually send a long distance signal on a surface in SpaceX using that technique. But really, it just allows you to create channels basically, and it's not limited to like one per surface. I don't believe that. I've not experimented with it too much. But this is saying that there'll only be one channel per surface. So what it doesn't seem to be giving us, which has to be in here somewhere, is the ability to send those channels, those signals, between surfaces. So in other words, if Nauvis is a surface, and Nauvis orbit is a surface, and Fulgora is a surface, and Fulgora orbit is a surface, and Volcanus is a surface, and you get the idea. But if each of those are surfaces, all this is adding in is the ability to communicate wirelessly using radars in that surface. So there must be some way of communicating between surfaces as well. And I'm wondering if that is like SpaceX, in that we have a separate building to do it. I think we've had a hint somewhere of there's been buildings that could have been, the sort of communication channel between the thing. What I'm suspecting is it's built into the, we have the planetary hub thing. I think it's built into that. I think that can communicate with all other surfaces, and that there's dedicated channels for doing that. Because it just seems like that would be a better integration, a better way of doing it. Simpler basically, and it brings it all together, and you can just have that going on. It was also interesting that they only gave us one, we're being limited to one of those per surface, so that would seem to make sense as being the communication channel. But this isn't confirming that, but it's also confirming that But what it is like negatively confirming is that it won't be radars that can communicate between surfaces, but you can now use radars to communicate over distance. Now, given what most people do use this for, as in gathering information from outposts or maybe from a wall, your defences or something like that, but it tends to be basically the same information coming in. Although it's a channel, I think it's still going to be able to send the same large number of signals. In other words, you could send the amount of iron, the amount of copper, the amount of steel, and everything, or the amount of ammo that you've got at your walls, and all of those sorts of things could still be sent via that one channel. So it's not literally that you can only send iron, you can only send copper. It'll be everything that you could send in a normal signal. It's just the point is that you can't split it up. So parallel to that might be something like the logistics networks, where we're getting the ability to create a network, a particular set of items that we want in a particular logistics network. Or I think we can do it train scheduling as well, can't we? Where we can set up different schedules, basically. And they can all sort of run in parallel and be working with different trains, etc. It's not going to be like that. So there's just going to be one comms channel for all radars that all radars are automatically connected to. So you couldn't have, so in this example I'm shown here, you couldn't have this radar and this radar on one channel and this radar and this radar are on another channel. They're all on the same channel. But because you couldn't switch between, you can send all of the signals, they could be they could be linked to things that are detecting different things. So you could link this up to something that works for iron, and another radar up to something that links for copper, and however you wanted to use this system. This does also show, this is literally how you get it in is just literally connecting on a cable. So this has been added to the graphic, enabling you to connect signal networks into your radars and just send the signal there. So yeah, it's like I say, it's sort of slammed in. It's like within four sentences or something. It's a huge big feature inclusion, and that's it. It's just like there's no real detail going on. There's no examples being given of it being used other than this, where we can't actually see what signals are being transmitted. So yeah. It sounds like it's a really big opportunity, but that's just been dropped on as with a full stop, as it were. Cutting wires by Coverix. Since all of the circuit network improvements have motivated me to use it more these days, I got annoyed more and more by this problem. The caption says, I want to move the bottom set of combinators, but if I do it with cut and paste, all the wires between the two parts will be lost and I have to wire it. So as it says in the text, basically, what Coverix is trying to do is basically take these and move them closer. I've found this a lot as well. It's really very annoying because you almost have to know, it becomes like a trial and error thing, but you almost have to know exactly where you want the combinators and exactly the combinators you want and place them exactly right and then wire them up. And I do this as well, put spaces in between, because when it's all mushed up close together, it can be really difficult to tell which wires are actually connected and to where. So I tend to do this as well, and then what I often do is copy and paste it somewhere else, then move the thing, and then use my other copy in order to see which wires I have connected, because it can sometimes be really complicated. And this is actually a relatively simple example. There could be connections across here, there could be a connection across there could be separate thing entirely going on with green wires, etc., etc. Especially now with the newer way of doing circuits, where we can create complicated connected systems basically and interlinking ones. This feels like I personally would have a lot of problem with, because I say create these gaps in order to find out what's going on, and then you've got to rearrange it all to make it all nice and tidy. So the improvement then, it became so annoying that I just had to add this quality of life feature to make it so the blueprint remembers the output circuit wire connections and tries to reconnect them if possible. To minimize problems, these connections are only remembered when using the cut tool and cannot ever be transferred into the blueprint library or blueprint export string. That obviously, just makes sense that they wouldn't allow that, because, what would that even mean? That would be really complicated. But they show it in action here, where basically he's using the cut tool to grab those combinators, move them closer. Obviously some bots come in and do the actual change, but basically then fills them in, and you will see that these connected wires here are exactly connected there. What's really nice about it is it actually shows the wires moving as you move it around. I mean, I don't know, why I was not expecting it would do that, but it just, it shows the wires moving around, so you can literally see it's still being connected, which is a really, really nice little touch, I think, because it could get quite confusing if you're cutting and pasting a lot of things and it's not showing you the wires. You could easily get quite confused. But yeah, this is just a really, really nice little quality of life feature that, as I say, is something that I've encountered quite a lot. I struggle with how the circuit network works because I've said this in the video when it was talking about a lot of the improvements. It's too simple for me. And I don't mean that in some big brain way, but literally it's doing, every single combinator does like one check, and it's just like so tedious and silly to set up, that I just end up, if I try to do anything complex, I'm trying to do the complex thing in as few actions as possible. Whereas a lot of the time with the circuit network, you have to do every single action independently and then make sure everything is connected that should be connected. Lightspeed is too slow. We need to go right to ludicrous speed by our seeding. I get that reference. There was a reference in the last one that I didn't get because it's just not really... It was from Firefly, and I've watched Firefly and I did enjoy it, but people seem to absolutely adore it, and it didn't... It's just Cowboy Bebop to me, but yeah. So there was a reference in the last one to Firefly, and I didn't spot it at all. But that one's Spaceballs, which is an amazing film. There's no such thing as too fast in Factorio. From the first machine placed, everything is about making them faster. Faster belts, faster inserters, faster assembling machines, and speed modules to make them go even faster. But that's not enough. Next, you add beacons with speed modules, and then another and another. But it's still not enough. It's never enough. Mods push the numbers even more and run into the limits of what the engine itself can handle. This just links out to a bug report, basically, and he mentions it later on, but basically it takes it to a point where it goes beyond one craft per tick, essentially, and that breaks the game, or it does at the moment. It has been reported a few times, and it gives just a few more examples of bug reports, and every time I said roughly the same thing. Crazy numbers get crazy results. Unless the base game runs into this, we don't want to make the crafting logic more complex and or fragile. Just don't do that. One craft per tick is fast enough. And yeah, the basic issue that they're talking about is that if the game attempts to make more than one item, more than one craft, more than one production cycle in every tick, and the game is divided up into 60 ticks per second. If there's more than one craft in a single tick, then it breaks, basically. You can kind of understand why there'd be that hard limit, because that's basically 60 crafts a second, not a minute, a second, every second. So what would that be? Is it 3,600 crafts a minute? I mean, that's so big that, and this is what they're coming on to, basically, but that's so big that you wouldn't actually be able to feed and output from a machine running at those speeds in normal vanilla Factorio. Now, obviously, mods added faster belts and things like that, but that is so quick that basically you inserter speeds and what have you are not quick enough to keep up with it. So why bother putting in that edge case? But then Space Age happened with its legendary speed modules, and all of a sudden it's a base game problem, and it was time for me to eat crow and find a solution. Handle the edge case, but don't make the main case slower. Conceptually, it's a simple fix. Loop the crafting logic if it needs to run faster than one craft per tick. But things are never that simple code-wise. Years of optimizations and features around assembling machines meant any changes done had a high likelihood of breaking something if I didn't fully understand what each line of code was supposed to do and what it was actually doing. So what it's basically saying is that the crafting logic is either presumably tied to the tick rate or not. I'm not 100% sure on that, but basically the point is that, so if a tick is the code running all of the things that need to happen before it updates, okay? One of the things you have to remember is every game is actually turn-based. There are no games that are actually real-time. What's happening in any real-time game is that game state is being updated 60 times a second, and the game is not pausing as such from your perception at those updates. It is pausing, but that is doing that. It's a bit like the thing that, when you watch a film, particularly for old school film, actual, celluloid film, what you're actually watching is a series of static images being flicked onto the screen. but your eyes cannot perceive that change, basically. And I think, is it 24 frames per second on cinema film? But basically the speed at which that updates is too quick for your eyes to perceive any pausing or stopping in between. And so you see it as a continuous flow of images. And that's exactly what happens with a game. Now, in a turn-based game, there would be a pause point. It wouldn't be every tick, but there's a pause point, and so it makes it feel like the game is stopping and waiting for you. And that's the thing, is it always is, because in a real-time game, it is doing that update. It's just that it's keeping going. It's never pausing, unless you hit the pause button. It's never pausing, and so it feels like it's running in real time. But actually, it's updating 60 times a second or 30 times a second or whatever your UPS is. So a single tick has a set of actions that it completes. And it would do all sorts of things, and there'll be all sorts of things in the code. And this is why when you hear people talking about threading, they don't really know what they're talking about, because one of the things with threading is that it splits a lot of tasks between different CPU cores. But it doesn't necessarily always gain you what people think it gains you, because in this, well, if you take, for example, this image here, where it's outputting the belts and all this sort of stuff, if you split all of these activities into different threads, then they can become desynced. So basically, if the swing animation and timing for the inserter is going at one speed, and the belt animation and what it's doing is going at a different speed, and the foundry itself is going at a different speed, because they're all on separate threads, then they become desynced. And so the belts are trying to put on something and take off, and it just doesn't work anymore. So you have to have hard limits. So even if you split it across multiple threads, all those threads have to run synchronously. So you're not really gaining anything. You can do, because there could be so many calculations that it takes so long to do that, but the gain that you have by splitting it up is not necessarily as big as you might think, because everything has to run at a particular tick rate in order to stay synchronized. And so the point here is that if you are updating the entire game on a single tick, I don't know quite how they're syncing it, but if you would want to do more than one craft per tick, that has to be in like a for loop or a repeat until loop, some kind of loop that is then independent to a degree of the actual tick rate. And therefore it can do, say, one loop round and another loop round and a third loop round before the next tick has happened. And that would then allow it to go faster than the tick rate. I say at the moment, presumably it is constrained to the tick rate so that it doesn't desync, and so the fastest it could go would be that tick rate. And so by making it independent, it can go faster, but the point would be that you don't want to have any unintended consequences. So you don't want it to be trying to do some other bit. If it's completely divorced from the update rate, then that's the tick rate, then that sync issue I've just described could happen. So that the machine has crafted, but it's happened so slowly that the ARM has tried to take out, or put in some resources and should have been able to, but wasn't able to. But the way it's been coded, for example, maybe that if it's able to swing, then the code says drop it will automatically drop off, and so therefore it's then put more items in than it can put in. That's a terrible example, because I'm sure they've not done it like that, but you get the point that it becomes desynced from everything else is the threat, basically. This is another one, by the way, where they just drop the change. There's no real explanation as to how it worked before and how it's been changed, other than it's been made to work. So I say that's what I was saying about it could be quite techie, but they've not gone techie on this one. So after about 2 days of looking over the code, rearranging and writing comments explaining parts to myself, I had a plan for how I was going to make it work. The final changes to make everything function correctly took about 1 hour to write and worked correctly the first try. That's not supposed to happen and left me with doubts. Several extra tests later, and asking BossKid to try and break it, it was confirmed to be correct. That is pretty rare, I'll be honest. Well, certainly in my code, but then I was always a bit of a botcher in my coding. But basically, it's almost always the case that you, even when you plan, you put something in the code, write something, and then that's the whole point of testing. Basically, you then do testing and you discover, oh, it doesn't work when you do this, or oh, it doesn't work when you do that, or oh no, the whole idea is completely broken because that array doesn't function in that way, or that pointer doesn't point where it should be pointing, or all these sorts of things happen. And so generally speaking, you end up like fixing it twice or fixing it multiple times, because the thing you thought should work won't quite work in all circumstances. But it sounds like that, they managed to get it to work properly first time. The 2 days of analysing and understanding the existing code paid off. So here it is then, an absolute insane crafting speed. A legendary foundry crafting at a swift plus 2,500% speed, completing 4.33 crafts per tick. Per tick. So that is crafting. Swiftly brings up his calculator. So if it's doing 4.33 crafts per tick, there will be 60 ticks per second. So it is crafting 259.8 items per second, or 15,588 items per minute. Wow. I mean, that's basically a mega base in a single foundry. That is an insane amount of cogs, basically, as it's producing here to craft. It does seem to be running at rate as well. The advantage it's got, in terms of material in particular, is the fact that it's fed by fluids. So this new molten iron thing that you can do means that if you can maintain the pressure in the fluid, then basically it has a continuous supply of raw material. So this is flickering away so quick you can't even say what's going on. But basically this is the bonus crafting, and you got to remember the foundry has that built-in 50% productivity. We can't see it because it's not got alt mode on. Oh no, it has actually, sorry, I can see it on there. It has four legendary speed modules. Level 3 speed modules, legendary 5-star quality speed modules in the actual foundry itself. So it's not getting a bonus prod, which I assume we can do. It is also, by the looks of things, a legendary foundry. And I believe legendary status increases that productivity bonus. It might not do, it might increase the speed. But basically it's a legendary foundry. And then it's been absolutely slammed with speed modules. So we have, because this is a bigger building, it can get more speed modules on it. So you've got 2, 4, 5, 10, 8, 16. Wow, 16 speed modules on it, which have level 3 speed modules for certain, but I suspect are actually quality, legendary quality level 3 speed modules. So the application is insane of that amount of stuff. And it's being outputted using the new stack, as we're calling it, or now stack inserter, and these of course output 16 items on a belt, as a single swing, but they basically become stacked as a single item. So it could actually, looking at it, have actually even more stack inserters on it, but I assume that's coping because it's not stuttering in the way you would expect with it. But basically you're getting 2, 4, 6, 8 fully complete stacks from stack inserters. This is getting very hard to say, but there's basically 8 stack inserters outputting full stacks onto the fastest leveler belt, and it is getting a little pause. If you notice, there is a tiny little pause gap in there, but basically it's producing 2 level 4 belts, which is, wasn't that 120 items a second? Which would make sense if it's doing out the 260 and then it's getting a little pause in it. That basically makes sense, doesn't it? So yeah, absolutely insane production. I'm guessing there is basically I'm sure they're doing it with with the editor and stuff, but I'm guessing there's probably basically a nuclear power plant running there, because that is an insane amount of power. We know this is hugely power hungry. We don't know how power hungry, but if you ramp it up with speed modules and beacons around it, this must be drawing a huge amount of power just on its own. But then look at what you're getting out of it. You're basically getting 2 almost full green belts of gears out of it, which, as I say, is almost what you need for an entire mega base. I mean, a smaller scale mega base, obviously. The underlying issue has been fixed, and, as far as I can tell, the only limit on how fast they can craft now is how many ingredients the machine has and how much space is available in the output slots. So that's what I was saying, as I say, that if you're going to pause, basically, if you can't put enough material into it and you can't get it out quick enough, basically. And so something like this foundry, which has an even bigger size, which means you can put even more assemblers on it, and inserters. And if you think about it, only one, I mean maybe both are actually filled in, but only one of these needs to be providing the material for the production, and it's got 2 slots, I think. So you could have some extra, there could be extra inserters around here basically, but it looks like this 8 I 8 stack inserters is enough. Wow. But yeah, I mean, in theory, it could be more. But if you think about it, if this was just an assembler, a 3x3 assembler, the max beacon coverage would be 12 and stuff, so it would be slower, and it doesn't have the inbuilt prod bonus. But you start to get into space limit, problems. Basically, you can't fit the number of inserters in that you need in order to put material into it, especially when it's multi-craft, multi-input materials. So if you were crafting something like rail, for example, which loses a lot of, has a very quick craft time itself, but uses a lot of stone and a lot of steel, basically. And so your problem when you have even an assembler making them is that you just can't get the stuff into the machine in order to feed it at the speed it wants to happen, it wants to craft at, especially if you can go nuts like this and get legendary speed modules in it. So that's going to be the real issue. And of course, the point is that mods will give you extra belt levels. They'll give you extra inserter capacity. They'll give you bigger productivity so that it slows the machine down in a sense. But yeah, so the difficulty is always getting the material in and out when you have these nuts crafting speeds. As always, wirelessly transmit your thoughts to us at the usual places. Okay, speculation then. I don't know. So, I mean, these seem really nice. The quality of life thing of moving the combinators and keeping the wire attachments is going to be such a huge help for me. It's something I do have a lot of frustration with, so that's going to be a really nice quality of life feature. I don't think it really changes much of anything though. It's not radically different. It's just nice. The crafting speed thing is just great. I mean, it's nice that it can now cope with those sorts of speeds, but you would kind of expect that if they're going to introduce all these legendary things and all this sort of stuff, then you would have to expect that they would fix that or adjust it or make it work in that way, because otherwise they'd need to end up putting on hard limits on the crafting speed of the machines or something like that, which would seem a bit silly because, why introduce these? Because you could easily have a mod that comes along and increases the numbers. That would, I assume, be a fairly simple change to make. So it increases the amount of bonus you get out of each level of quality. And so, bam, you would suddenly hit, if they hard limited it, then suddenly, a mod could easily make it bigger. Or even just introduce a new quality level, a level 6 quality that's even better. There could be all sorts of options there about things people could do, so it makes sense that they would fix it. I don't know that I will be working with machines like this. It does feel very much in the insane mega base territory because, and this is one of these things I've been saying in quite a lot of these Friday Facts, that it feels like they're adding in things to make mega basing kind of easier. But not from a point of view of just making it easier, more from a point of view of if you're going to have effectively, what are we going to end up with, 5 planets and space as well, 10 different planets effectively. If you've got to manage all of that, and my assumption on all of the planets is that they are infinite surfaces, or not infinite, because it's not infinite, is it? But effectively infinite, so big that you could never actually play on it, that that the map size isn't a limited thing, which I've found that it is in SpaceX. I wasn't expecting that. But some of the planets are just literally tiny little surface, tiny little globe things, and that's it. And I'm expecting that's not going to be the case with Factorio. So in theory, you could build a gigantic base on every single planet, and then you're into performance nightmares for a normal player, just playing a normal game. So if they give you lots and lots and lots of ways of just massively improving your productivity in this tiny little planet. And my suspicion, I know, so a couple of the planets that we've seen, Volcanus and Volgora, they have deliberately introduced mechanics, as well as now this sort of with the cliffs, that not giving us cliff explosive, where it forces you to build in a limited space. So Volcanus is because it's got all of these cliffs, and you've got these whacking great, lava things, and it doesn't feel like you're going to be able to build a gigantic base until you get cliff explosives there. And that to me seems like a kind of a gameplay way of limiting factory size. And so to compensate for that, because you're going to have to be sending loads and loads of rockets no matter what you do, so you need all this productivity. So to compensate for that, they're giving us lots of ways to make for machines, or machines that automatically make loads and loads of material just in their default state, but also adding in all these quality mechanics and making them bigger machines so that you can put more beacons on them, and that stack inserters, stacking on belts, extra belt level, so that you can have a massive productivity in a small footprint. And so this just feels like the logical next step, that you've got to make it so that if someone does go, right, I'm going to make a foundry that makes an insane number of cogs per second, they could easily break the game at the moment, and so that fixes that issue. So it's really good that they have, kind of confirmed that. I suspected that that would be the case anyway, but there you go. The radar signal thing is really interesting, as I was saying during the speculation during the video, more from a point of view of this is not how we're going to communicate between surfaces, and there must be some way of doing that. I cannot see how you would manage your system if there was absolutely no way of communicating between ground and orbit and then between other planets, because how do you get your space factories running? And because one of the issues with SpaceX, and I've not encountered this yet, although I'm just starting to get to that bit, is it gives you cargo rockets, and these cargo rockets have an enormous volume, like huge, but they're quite expensive to make and quite expensive to send, and you like lose material because they crash when they land. It's a bit weird, but basically it becomes about like churning out huge volumes of stuff just to have a rocket that's not being wasted. And so we know that we've got the opposite problem in base Factorio, in that they have limited the amount that a rocket can send to quite a small volume, but we still want to be able to do these big factories, don't we? So they've got to give us a nice mechanism for getting in lots and lots of stuff. And at the moment, you would do that by setting your rail limit, your like logistic systems on your rail, and this type of idea, sending signals around from outposts and all that sort of stuff, is all about being able to control your big factory. Well, if there's no way of communicating to space and saying, right, send me 5,000 science packs, or launch a rocket for some special condition. I need loads of tungsten carbide now, sort of thing, or I want tungsten carbide being delivered, when the space platform is full, and and maybe it needs to go to 3 different planets, and you've got to prioritize which planet it goes to. And so how do you do that without any kind of way of transmitting signals between the systems? You'd have to hard code everything, well, not hard code, but like design it in, and that would be really quite difficult. So we must have some way of sending signals between surfaces, and it's interesting that radars is not that way of doing it, because it would have been an option. I suppose the difficulty in a sense is that if they gave you infinite channels, you could really get in a mess and really get confused. If they gave you a channel per surface, you could just use all of them on one planet and it would get a bit strange. When it came to another planet, you would be reusing it, which would be very strange. It'd be very confusing, I think. So it's nice that it is one channel per surface and that it's sent over radar. But I say that means to me that we must have some other way of sending the signal, and I think that might be the Space Hub. It did look, I think, like it had a radar on it. So I just came and checked the old Friday Facts where it was mentioned, and if you notice, it's got a little radar dish on it, and this has a radar dish on it as well. So I'm thinking that maybe this is the way that information is transmitted, basically, this thing here. I guess it's just worth noting that in 2 weeks' time it is Easter, and so I will not be able to record the Friday Facts video until I'm back from my little holiday that I'm taking. I'm just visiting some family, but it means that I won't be around to record the video on the Friday. In 2 weeks' time there will be a Friday Facts, but it will be very late. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you want to chat about the latest Factorio Friday Facts, then you can find me live streaming Factorio every Saturday over on my Twitch channel at Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Motimated.